Hello, and welcome to episode 106 of our podcast at Human Restoration Project. My name is Chris McNutt, and I'm a high school digital media instructor from Ohio. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this is brought to you by our supporters, three of whom are Jordan Vaca, Rachel Lawrence, and Lisa Sharfstein. Thank you for your ongoing support. You can learn more about the Human Restoration Project on our website, humanrestorationproject.org, or find us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. This podcast is our first of what we're calling the Spotlight series. Every so often, we'll be reaching out to schools who are doing intriguing progressive practices that could inspire and influence others to do the same. Each has a twist on how their school is operated, and we're bringing in students and teachers to talk about it. They're not all perfect, and I think they'd all acknowledge that there are things that they change, but there's so much to learn from these schools as we reimagine education in our communities today. Today, we are joined by students and faculty from Assumption College, a Catholic co-ed 7 through 12 secondary school located in Kilmore, Victoria, Australia, featuring 1,200 students, some of whom board on campus. Assumption is doing a lot of fascinating work that would interest people involved in progressive education and reform measures. In the last few years, they transferred to what they call the MyMAP program, which stands for Mastery, Autonomy, and Purpose. Instead of assigning students to traditional classes, students have the option between many different classes that are then mapped to traditional graduation needs. This means that students that have an interest in the arts will have a drastically different curriculum than, say, engineering. To learn more, we're talking today with Kate Fogarty, the principal, Vaughn Cleary, the deputy principal, Kendall Aglinskas, professional practices coordinator and learning leader, and Belle Lescott and Billy Carlin, both Year 11 students. All of these folks have been at Assumption before and after this new self-directed style curriculum began.
Thanks, Chris. It's lovely to be with you and to be able to share a little bit of what's been happening here at Assumption. So Assumption is a Catholic day and boarding school in Australia. In Australia, Catholic schools are also government funded. So we're not, a private or an independent school. We are within the system. And we have about 1,350 students and about just over 100 teachers and about another 80 other staff on site. We do have day students, predominantly day students, but about 70 students who are boarding who live here on site. So we're just to the north of Melbourne. We're in a country town, Kilmore. A number of our students come out of the suburban areas, but the vast majority come out of little country towns in about a 100-kilometre radius of us. So a lot of them are on the bus for an hour or so before they get to us each morning.
It's a very interesting model because it reminds me a lot more of a liberal arts college as opposed to a traditional school.
Yeah, we're a big school. We're on an enormous campus. We've got 4 Australian rules football fields or cricket pitches, which I know won't be familiar to a lot of your listeners, but are big playing fields for our students, 12 tennis courts, a big hockey pitch where we've got a big sport and cultural program. We run a farm, so we have an agriculture program as well with large animals and small animals, from snakes through to big cows and everything in between. We've got a lot going on. We say we're a juggernaut. We're a really big school and we go 24/7.
You raise snakes?
Yeah, I know. We've got a couple. It is a thing. Yeah, it's the kids studying to be vets, apparently. Yeah.
To take a slight pause here, here's an overview of the MyMAP curriculum from Assumption College.
MyMAP acknowledges that students learn at different speeds and have different strengths. It provides learning opportunities across 6 semesters or 3 years that align with 4 levels. In MyMAP, the 4 distinct colours of our college crest represent the 4 levels of learning. White is the first level, so it represents the foundational courses assessed against Level 8 of the Victorian curriculum. Yellow courses provide a more enriched experience and typically relate to Level 9. Light blue courses align to Level 10, and dark blue courses are designed to extend students and are mapped to Level 10 of the Victorian curriculum and beyond. In addition to subjects that align to one particular level of the Victorian curriculum, some courses will be multi-level. For example, a subject such as visual communication and design could be offered to students across both the white and yellow levels. Other subjects may even align with two learning areas. An example is the science of sport, which connects both physical education and science. Subjects like this are designed to prepare students for future courses that have similar knowledge and skills. In this example, VCE Physical Education and VCE Physics. Complementing our academic program is MyBeing, a 3-year program where the social and emotional development of each student is fostered. MyBeing explores topics such as personal relationship building, learning to learn, food, nutrition and education, safety online and in person, vocational pathways, and mindfulness.
About 6 years ago, Vaughan, myself and Kendall and a number of the other leaders of the community were watching our student data really plateau and they didn't seem to be progressing in their learning. We were running a very traditional curriculum, and our cultural data that we were receiving from large-scale surveys was showing, particularly in those middle years, the 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, they were just getting more and more disengaged in their learning. So we looked at all of that data, spoke to a number of institutions around the place and organisations, and really reflected ourselves and thought we need to do something radically different here to get our students back on track and really invigorate and be able to demonstrate growth for these kids and provide them with interesting and exciting pathways. So we put in place some sub-teams who were looking very closely at various areas of the school curriculum. So that included everything from, we were looking at stage not age learning. We saw some real possibilities there. We were looking at the data that we had available and really how well or not we were sharing that with students and helping them to understand their learning journey. And we were looking at just how much breadth we could offer and really still key, hone in on those key skills that the Victorian government, our state government, but also what we knew in our hearts needed to be a part of our kids' curriculum. So it really, we put everything on the table. We tried to be as courageous as possible, saying we don't have to do things the way they've always been done. We kept using the mantra, students at the centre. This whatever we do has to meet the needs of our students and help them really engage in their learning in new ways. So that we could, really help them to be the best that they possibly could be.
So, Chris, just to also add in a little bit of a background, one of the things that we found, at Assumption is that the narrative that was quite common in the staff is that the kids were not motivated. And, in many ways, the way that a traditional curriculum was set up, meant that students really struggled to engage with classes and curricula that perhaps didn't suit their needs. So one of the things that we wanted to do is to try to create a program that actually met, the needs of the students, and hence the origin of MyMAP. Really is the work of Dan Penk and his work drive, focusing on mastery, autonomy and purpose. And it really is a take on, self-determination theory from Dici and Ryan, where we wanted to create an environment that met the needs of the students. On top of that too, a lot of the research that we looked at, such as stage environment fit theory from Eccles and colleagues, basically indicated that the way secondary schools are set up were not conducive to meet the needs of students, and other factors such as identity formation, relationship building, etc. Again, were just not being met by what was a very traditional curriculum. So what we have is a 4-year MyMAP program where the students come into secondary school from over 50 different primary schools or elementary schools around the state. And they start a semester program that we call Quire, and Quire means to seek. So our seekers are our curious learners who basically engage with all the different learning domains. And by the end of their first semester, they're ready to select a personalised learning program, based on their strengths, interests, and needs at that point in time. So what the students can do is basically select their own personalised program. We ask our students to select an English of their choice. They've got, about 10 different types of English to pick from. A religious education of their choice, and the same thing. We've got over a dozen of different RE options, and they also engage in a mass pathway program, which is basically a digital program that's personalised for them. In addition to that, between the middle of year 7 right through to their senior pathways, students get to pick about 25 different mastery courses. And these mastery courses are not aligned to a traditional year level. They're actually aligned to a different colour. And our college colours include sandstone, white, yellow, light blue, dark blue. And our mantra is, as the colours intensifies, so does the learning experience. So our students can engage with different learning domains with different colours at a level of their choice.
This is fascinating because it's really exploring changing systems that in most environments are not being tackled, especially implementing multi-age learning and changing how we view curriculum and choice. To quickly understand about how you establish those classes, let's say that you have 10 English classes on a variety of topics. How did you then come up with those 10?
I guess the biggest thing when we were going to transition to MyMAP was the importance of collaborating as teams. And, we needed to make sure that everyone was on the same page and everyone had buy-in to that vision that we had, because, I think that was something that some of the teachers were a bit hesitant about, but I think coming together was a really important part of that. So for the English faculty, for instance, we had a lot of meetings with all of us there. A lot of the time we do have meetings with everyone, but a lot of the times they meet kind of in little team groups or things like that. So coming together as a large team for 3 or 4 weeks in a row, was a time commitment for all of us. And we just spoke about what was working well in the current program, what texts we really enjoyed, what the kids were really engaging with. We did a lot of Google Forms with the kids to get some feedback about what was working well, even better if. And just some dreams that they had. If you could choose to study anything, what do you think you'd like to study? And so we heard from a lot of students about, quest narratives, so adventure stories or science fiction, which we really hadn't covered in the curriculum before. So that was really interesting to us and fantastic. So when we started to kind of look at this, the progression from year 7, our text selection and what units we were studying right up to our mandated VCE curriculum and what we have to do at our senior secondary school, we kind of tried to sort out where those gaps were. So looking at what genres were we potentially missing, or what periods of history were we potentially not looking at? Have we got enough female voices? Have we got enough male voices? Have we got people from different cultural backgrounds? Do we have Indigenous Australian text? Have we got Australian narratives that we're hearing as well? So we really tried to look at those and had, for English, a book club. So everyone kind of went, okay, cool, let's go speak with our experts, the librarians who read very regularly. Let's speak to our students about what they're reading and really enjoying. And we were just passing around books and thinking, okay, well, where do these fit in? So the kind of 10 subjects came from they're thematic based. So we have, for instance, at a yellow level, so a traditional level 9, something Call to Adventure. So it's all about quest narratives. So they watch the film Rango, with good old Johnny Depp there with the chameleon. They read a lot of, like these quest narrative stories where they're seeing this adventure happen and then recreating that. And we found those sorts of things were really engaging to our students, and they just were able to have that choice with what they were studying rather than, everyone being told you're reading this book, the whole year level is doing it, and there wasn't a lot of choice in that. So, that was kind of, I guess, how we came up with those as well.
I think what I enjoyed of watching this process of these new courses being developed was that staff were able to bring their own passion. So suddenly we had science courses or, humanities courses or whatever it might be, where staff are able to share their passion with students too. And very often that, when teachers can teach from their point of passion rather than from a textbook or from, a curriculum that's been handed to them from somebody else, that brings another level of aliveness for the students to what's being learnt together. So we had, subjects being thrown up as suggestions there was a committee who were ultimately deciding, was that meeting the standards, the government standards? Was it, did it fit in with a line of progression from the junior level learning right through to what needed to be done for the students to receive their final certificate? Did everything fit together? But, it was so surprising to us, the vast the variety of subjects that our staff were able to take from their own passion or from what they'd been working on with kids and seen a spark of interest in, and then create, still sticking to the government prescriptions, these amazing subjects. And, we've seen a wholesale change of students flooding into the science subjects in a way that we couldn't have predicted, because these subjects are now tailored to pathways and they're tailored to interest, as opposed to let's just do Year 8 science. So that's been really pleasing to us, that sort of an outcome has come, that people's passion's been reignited from staff right through to students.
And I would guess that because there's more passion from the teachers, it's then a more intriguing class, because there's certainly things that I currently teach that I'm not passionate about. And although I might try, it's still pretty meh experience. So then you also have this color system that corresponds with the difficulty level of the courses. Is choosing that difficulty something that students choose to gauge and then tackle based off what they want to accomplish? Or is it a recommendation from the advisor that's sort of negotiated upon?
Chris, it's at the end of the day, it's ultimately the student's choice. We wrap a series of layers of support around the students. And, we've used the metaphor of journey, via MyMAP, with our students. And, we say the adults in the kids' lives are their tour guides. So sometimes they need to nudge, push, maybe sometimes hang back students in regards to, the sorts of subjects they should pick. We have, learning mentor teachers that are walking alongside the students along their journey. And because they're with the students from the start of Year 7, they ultimately know and love these students in incredible depth, and engaging the parents as well as the subject teachers. So, ultimately having the students having choice, gives them the power to make good decisions for themselves. And we know that, not every decision that a student makes is, perhaps, ideal for them or perfect. And that's okay. We're teaching the students to, make decisions, to self-regulate, to have ownership of their learning. And, if they do make mistakes, that's okay. They see out the subject and they pick something different the next time. So I think ultimately, in 99% of the cases, they're making good decisions, and, giving them those choices works out in their favour.
But one of the portions we haven't talked about here, though, is we are, of course, doing some standardised testing of the students. We have a national standardised testing program, but we do some additional testing. And one of the real keys to this program working well was the work that we did with learning mentors, so our staff, to work with each student so that they understood their own data, so they could see where their progression points were against a standardised set of data, so they could read their own school reports from their teacher properly and understand what was being fed back to them, and so that they and their parents, so we included the parents in those discussions, and that happens a few times a year. They're not going in and just saying, I want to do a whole lot of sport and that's all I want to do. There are adults walking with them and helping them, make wise choices, but also, as Vaughan said, nudging them where they need to be pushed a little bit ahead, or perhaps even, held back in a subject, or perhaps, literacy is not going so well. How about you take 2 Englishes this semester rather than just the traditional one? So, there is a lot of very rich conversation happening around the individual student and what we know about them and where their passions are, but also what a whole range of other sources of information are telling us about their learning.
I would imagine then, as a result of not restricting the challenge, that many students who are very passionate about a subject, but perhaps historically were labeled as not being able to accomplish a difficult course, are then able to rise to that occasion because they have an interest in it. And of course, in the exact same way, if you really don't like something, you can just take the easy course and get it out of the way. Apologies for a brief ad break, but I wanted to share a second about our upcoming Conference to Restore Humanity 2022. If you're listening to this before July 2022, I've got great news. HRP is hosting a virtual conference soon. Conference to Restore Humanity is an international invitation for K-12 and college educators to engage in a human-centered system redesign. centering the needs of students and educators toward a praxis of social justice. Through a conference designed for virtual learning, participants will engage in a classroom environment that mirrors the same progressive pedagogy we value with students. After selecting a track, educators will be placed with like-minded cohorts over 4 days to imagine and build new ideas together. We have keynote conversations with Dr. Henry Giroux, founding theorist of critical pedagogy, Dr. Denisha Jones, educator, activist, and co-founder of Black Lives Matter at School, and the Circle Keepers from Harvest Collegiate High School, a student collective focused on social justice. Plus, our tracks push a new narrative for education, with topics including anti-carceral pedagogy, disrupting discriminatory linguistics, designing for neurodivergence, and promoting childism in the classroom. It's from July 25th to July 28th, and as of recording, early bird tickets are still available. It's $150 for 4 days, with discounts available for the BIPOC, AAPI, trans, and disabled communities, as well as group rates. Plus, we'll award certificates for teacher training and continuing education credits. See our website, humanrestorationproject.org, for more information, and we hope to see you there. I would like to turn to the students who are joining us today. Can you describe, what is a day in the life like for you all? What are you experiencing? What does this look and feel like?
So essentially, school starts at 8:45 when we all make our way to homeroom. We get our name marked off at homeroom. It goes for 15 minutes. Miss will talk us through the whole day. If there's any announcements, we'll do the morning prayer. Then we'll move on to period 1. 3 classes for each subject each week. So we'll have period 1, recess, period 2 and 3, back to back, lunch, and then period 4. So there's only 4 periods in the day, and then.
And for of those 4 classes, so these are all fairly unique, I think. What's one that stands out to you as being especially interesting?
So I do systems engineering, which is it's just like mechanics and stuff. I find that really interesting.
Really, and kind of turning the same question to you, Belle.
I like to do a bit of everything, and I found that's kind of where MyMAP has led me. So I did a bit of everything in MyMAP, and now even when I'm in year 11 doing my senior school studies, I've chosen a bit of everything. So I do 2 Englishes, English and literature. I do 2 maths, so methods, and we call it further maths. And then I also do a science, chemistry, and a PE. So I kind of like having a variety.
Yeah, I was looking at your schedules before the podcast, and you're basically virtual opposites. And what's interesting about all of this is that both of you were enrolled at Assumption prior to the school shifting to this MyMAP philosophy. What was that transition like? Was it simply a traditional school day transitioning to something with choice, or was it something else?
I found that it was a pretty easy transition. So even though we'd all completed 2 years of that traditional learning where you got told what to do and you had to pick, you had to do everything, ranging from drama and dance to PE and humanities. When you had to transition to picking your own subjects, it was really easy because even in those traditional based programs, you did have your favourite subjects and the stuff, you knew what you didn't like and you knew what you liked, and you had interests outside of that. So it was an easy transition because you kind of just followed with what you'd previously known you enjoyed.
Yeah, and I'm assuming it's the same for you, Bill. Easy transition over to that?
I noticed that even when the transition was fairly easy, because the days were still the same, no periods were changing, time wasn't changing. But I found in the actual classes, it was a lot easier to focus because you're doing things that you enjoy. Everyone else in the class was doing things that they enjoy as well. So there was a lot less behavioural issues. Even the teacher was more engaged in the class, I found.
Yeah, I say this not to take anything away from what you all are doing, but that concept just seems so common sense. When you really cut back on all of this, if you provide students choice in what they do during the day, of course they'd be more interested and engaged in learning. When we remove some of that bureaucracy and I suppose industry from the classroom curriculum and change these systems, this idea of, hey, we should just let students sign up for the classes that they want to sign up for, of course leads to better results all around. Let's talk a little bit about the mentoring and class selection process. Let's say that you're interested in English or maybe engineering. Do you have to take a certain number of classes in certain subject areas, or are there mandated classes? What does that look like?
Yeah, you have to do an RE and English and then the Maths Pathway program. The Maths Pathway program is also from year 8 to 10, and then everyone just pretty much does their own thing. The teacher helps guide us, and we follow our own path in that. In terms of the what we have to do, is it seven electives?
Yeah, roughly per year, Billy. So over the 3.5 year journey, it equates to about 25 different mastery courses of pure choice.
Ample selection, but very, very small limitations on what we have to do, which is really awesome. And in the Englishes and REs, you also have a choice.
And I would imagine that the English and math portions are required because of standardized testing, which makes sense. And to me, that's inspiring, because that means that these reform measures are possible in places other than Assumption College. I mean, that's a very common problem in most places. Let's talk then about choice in terms of difficulty. Are you all taking the hardest classes possible? Are you mixing and matching your courses?
Yeah, acceleration was a big part, like in decision making. So I'd found I knew I was more advanced in certain areas, mainly speaking English. And from a traditional classroom, it's where everybody's at the same level. So you could be in a classroom where the majority are at, for instance, in year 8 English. You've got kids who are year 9 or above, but you've also got kids who are below. So I found through MyMAP, I could push myself in certain areas. So I was surrounding myself with other students who were at my own level, which made a massive difference in my schooling, because you could, not only was the classes different and it was more engaging because you were doing stuff that challenged you on a daily basis, but it was really good to be able to work with kids who were at your own level, bounce ideas off people. The teachers it made teaching easy because you were teaching a core group of kids who were all at that same level because they'd all picked to be there.
It reminds me a lot of some of my experiences in school. I guess like most educators, I was a pretty decent student. I took mostly honors or AP courses, but I just really disliked science, so I took the typical science class. And I never felt like I was in more of a holding cell than that course, because the lack of choice meant that almost no students wanted to be there. Students were there because there was nowhere else to go. I was fortunate in kind of a twisted way that most of our assignments at school were able to be done at home. And frankly, I was true it multiple times because I just didn't like going to school in general, let alone those science classes. A lot of learning just felt like someone was just trying to control the class through a lot of constant work, as opposed to any sense of wonder or discovery, or even fun for that matter. It's very interesting how then curriculum and discipline and choice all tie together. Question for you, Kendall, seeing this from a teaching and learning angle. From your perspective, is that transition for teachers the same? Because I would imagine that this may appear overwhelming to transition to these types of courses to some that have taught in a very specific way.
I think we were quite shocked at the lack of issues we actually had in transitioning with the staff. I think we were very prepared in the way that we went about getting these different groups around the school to kind of buy in. We did a lot of small team discussions, so really getting those core groups of people who we knew were going to be really important voices in their offices or in the faculty area to jump on board. So we really sold it in that way. And when the transition happened, as Kate mentioned before, there's staff members now that are teaching archaeology that was never even a course, and that's something they did at university and really loved. And we've got kids that are, just flooding to those courses, or journalism, for instance, or things like that, where, in a traditional system, you wouldn't have had that opportunity to do. So I think that buy-in from staff was really key. We had a lot of hesitancy in terms of the timing, and, teachers our one big thing is always time. Where's the time to do this? And I think they were a little concerned about the time to write courses because pretty much all of our courses were going out the window with the traditional curriculum, and we were creating these really great new MyMAP courses. So while you might have kept a couple of units here and there, largely they were being rewritten. So I think the hesitancy in that regard was definitely present, and we put a lot of emphasis in 2020 in our first year on the time for staff and really taking back our professional learning and giving them the autonomy to just meet as teams, work collaboratively together to create these courses, and the time to also, play around with what was working in those courses, what wasn't, and adjust them as they went. So, now we're seeing that in a few years, a couple of years down the track, and that's really evident within the classrooms and how engaged the students are as well.
Another thing that was really important, Chris, from a change management perspective is the fact that, when Kate and I, were talking to staff about this change program, we're really, really open with explaining the why. And our staff and students and parents have been absolutely outstanding in actually understanding the philosophy behind the program. And, once that was explained and understood, it meant that the staff themselves could, develop, courses of their choice. And we also sent a really strong message to our community that we are going to eradicate the hierarchy of subjects. So the first time ever, the visual arts teacher was given the same amount of time in the curriculum than a high performance basketball teacher, than a maths teacher or an English teacher. So it really did say to our staff that their own learning domain that they're passionate about is of equal importance. And I think that, really sent a strong message to everybody that, they're all valued. So that was a significant part of our, support for our community.
And I guess the other part of that, as we were preparing staff, is there was a bit of anxiety around, what do you mean I'm going to have, 13-year-olds and 16-year-olds in the same class? How is that going to work? And how am I going to manage these kids who are different levels? Within about a week, not even, within a few days of us starting, that question just completely disappeared. And all staff were seeing was the group of students in their class who were there to do the subject. So that anxiety around what a multi-age class is like was taken away completely, for the staff by their experience. And the students, I know we had a handful of students and families who were quite worried about that too before the start. And that, again, those voices just fell away within the first week or so, because these kids, as Belle said, they got into their classes, they were there with like-minded students who were pitched about the same level in their learning, and they had these passionate teachers and these awesome new subjects. You just have to cast your eye. I encourage people to look at our website and cast your eye over the names of the subjects, and they just they're very exciting. They're all still matched to our state curriculum, so they all provide a pathway. But they actually, because they're much more particular topics, they really just were engaging. So the students, I think students by and large have stopped noticing what year level, that they are in. They've still got their friends who might be from the group who they first entered the school with, but there are a lot more multi-age friendships. There's certainly multi-age learning going on in every classroom, every moment of the day. That weird distinction of, batching kids by their age for their learning has more or less been eradicated, which just, as reflecting as an educator who's watched the system for, a number of years, it just makes such sense. Batching kids by their age for a whole range of reasons lets a whole lot of kids down. And this really has, as you keep using the word eradicated a lot of those problems, because students are with like-minded students, with a teacher who's, an interesting topic, but they're learning at a level that is pushing them in their particular subject. They can double down in a particular area of school learning. They can let go others that don't have an interest or a pathway for them. They can really tailor a curriculum that's going to take them into, keep it broad. So, they've got lots of options, or tailor it very specifically into an area that brings them great joy and passion and advancement in their learning.
Yeah, the conjunction between choice and difficulty level, choice and discipline, multi-age learning, it all comes together. I mean, how are you supposed to learn what it means to be a 16-year-old if you're always surrounded by people who are, let's say, 14 years old. It's just not a natural learning experience. I mean, if you're 25 years old and you entirely exclude people who are, let's say, 35 years old, that would be really weird. And I wanted to ask about how all these different things are coming together. I think someone who listening in might see this almost like through rose-tinted glasses, like nothing is wrong, that there's no issues with this new system. Are there difficulties that you all are facing?
Chris, so, it's an interesting question. And, to be quite honest, I think we're all pinching ourselves, 2.5 years later that, we seem to have transitioned, so seamlessly into this program. We've obviously had COVID thrown at us during this time. And I think, to be honest, Chris, if something was going to derail us, it would have already happened. But during COVID, where we did a lot of home learning, and mind you, Victoria was one of the most locked down, jurisdictions in the world, that we didn't have one complaint from a teacher or students about a lack of appropriate work. And, I think we've found a sustainable model and a sustainable framework that's going to be great moving forward. One of the brilliant things about our program is that we know it will evolve over time and it's not going to remain stagnant. So, any good curriculum will change. Yet we know we've got some subjects that may fade away from the framework, and we've also brought in another 15, new subjects this year that are engaging students. So we see it will develop and mould over time. As I said, I think we've got a sustainable framework. So, cross our fingers. Let's hope that our community can, be still doing MyMAP in the future. But I think the level of engagement with the research and, having really good answers about why we're doing that has meant that we've all focused on the goal of a student-centred education, as Kate mentioned.
And I imagine there's some administrators or principals listening who are going, how on earth did they afford to do this? We're not a wealthy school by any stretch. We're very, very, very middle class and even low middle class in terms of our families. And we are actually running this slightly less expensively than we did the traditional curriculum. So our average class size is just over 20. And really what's happened there is it's evened out the class sizes across the school from year 7 to year 12. So in the past, where you might have had some really big groups at the junior levels, like 30s, our 27, 28, 30, and then much smaller groups up higher because you're offering more specialty subjects. In fact, offering these specialty subjects across the whole curriculum has reduced our cost of staffing. The little extra cost that comes in that has obviously been a bit over the first few years is making sure we've got spaces set up for all of these different classes. But what it's really taught our teachers is, you don't need the textbook. You don't need to rely on the textbook. You can build a really good, rigorous curriculum around a whole range of things. That specialty equipment, cross-faculty subjects work really well, and that has really been another inspiration for a lot of our staff, that those cross-curricular subjects where resources can be shared has increased their capacity to offer a bigger range of subjects. One of the favourite ones we've got going is Paddock to Plate, where the agriculture and the food technology courses are running together, and kids are literally following their sheep from little babies right through to the great meal that's had. And the science team have done some really amazing work across all the faculties building cross-curricular courses. So, in fact, in terms of sustainability long term, I don't see any significant issues in that space. I guess really for us, it's feeling like the sky's the limit, and we're really looking at now, how do we build more relationships with other organisations outside of Assumption so that these subjects have even more real-world pathways, and whether that's through to university or through to the TAFE sector or through to business or the community sector, we're open for anything and actively exploring, all of these options for partnerships in really new ways compared to what we did when we were under a traditional curriculum.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because a lot of this type of stuff tends to be reserved for those who can afford it. And your school does charge a tuition, but it is relatively, at least, quite low. I wanted to conclude with this, because this model, I believe, is worth spreading. There's a lot to learn from this. From the student perspective, why would you all say that schools, other schools, and other teachers should consider this model?
One of the main things I've noticed with the MyMAP program is the connection that I've created with teachers. I've had the same teachers since I've been in year 8 all the way now through to VCE. And I've created a bond with them that's helped me push myself and just to help me succeed in the subjects. And even if it's not about the subject, we still get along as friends. However, I still do have that respect for them as a teacher. And they're helping me now through VCE to try and guide me through the very tough years of year 11 and 12, even if it's just giving me an idea of what I should do for a project or setting me on the right track to, they've set me on the right track to succeed all the way through. So that's my main thing about MyMAP that I've enjoyed.
But it is the most engaging school program on offer, and that not only does it engage students and make them enjoy coming to school each day, but it also provides them with immense opportunities going further as you reach senior school pathways, whether that's acceleration or anything. So that, it makes kids want to come to school, but it also benefits them in ways that are just incredible.
Thank you again for listening to Human Restoration Project's podcast. I hope this conversation leaves you inspired and ready to push the progressive envelope of education. You can learn more about progressive education, support our cause, and stay tuned to this podcast and other updates on our website at humanrestorationproject.org.